this was a team I thought that our fan base could really get behind and be proud of.
Welcome into the Scarlet Shootaround podcast, following the beat of Husker basketball. Here are your hosts, Blake and Mike.
Nebraska's road letdowns continue in a 94-76 Iowa road loss. Hello, everybody, and welcome in again to the Scarlet Shootaround podcast. My name is Blake, here with co-host Mike, and Mike travels continue. I am currently recording this one in a closet in Dallas, so I apologize if, any quality is disrupted, but we will be home soon. I think we only have one more episode that I need to record on the road. So, Mike, how are you doing today?
Just been sitting in the apartment most of the day trying not to freeze my ass off. I think I looked at the weather here about 30 minutes ago and it's negative 16 out. I know it's pretty bad when even the dog doesn't want to stay outside. So between the cold and the loss last night, I've had better days, but it's every day above ground's a good day, I guess. I'm pretty sure I heard that in a song one time. So that's that, I suppose.
Well, the weather stopped fans, both Nebraska and Iowa alike, from attending at Carver Hawkeye, but it did not matter, Mike, as Iowa ransacked the Huskers for an 18-point win. Let's get into this one. It was not pretty. Mast goes for 14, 5, and 2, shoots 6 and 9 from the field. It's one of his 2 3-pointers. He played okay. His offense was rolling pretty well when the ball was running through him in the high post there. Tominaga goes for 13, 0, and 1, 6 of 10 from the field. Only hits one of his 5 3-point attempts. Relatively efficient, but he also had 3 turnovers, Mike. Alec had a nice game, 14, 5, and 1 for him, goes 5 of 6 from the field. I think he had 3 dunks, had a lot of energy all game, one of the few guys that brought it. What kind of performance stuck out for you amongst the Huskers in this one?
I think as far as performance period, Bryce Williams had just a very poor performance. He only had 6 points, went 3 for 11 from the field, 0 for 6 from 3, and I don't know if obviously he had that ankle issue before Purdue and he looked just fine, but came out today and he just looked off the whole game. I don't know what that was about. It's probably one of his worst games that I've seen, at least in his Husker career so far. He team worst in the plus minus at minus 31. So just wasn't happening for him anywhere on the offensive side or defensive side, which is tough to see. That's the one that really stood out to me. You mentioned Alec. I think he actually, like you said, brought the energy. At one point, I think he was getting a little fatigued from 3 straight dunks in the span of 3 minutes. It's pretty tough. And if we're talking about positive sides, I do want to give a shout out to Eli Rice. He played, I think it's a season high in minutes. He had nearly 19 minutes. He ended up with 11 points. I think he did a pretty good job on both ends of the floor. Kind of a spark plug off the bench for us when things weren't really going well for the first half. Coach Hoiberg went to him there pretty early, and he was able to come in. Normally think about him coming in in the previous games and hitting a 3 in about 2 or 3 minutes of game time. But he did a lot of his work actually in the paint. He went 4 for 7, 1 for 3 from deep. So he was really good at getting to the hoop. He was really good at finishing when he had the chance, and I was really impressed by what he did.
And Alec, like you mentioned, brought a lot of energy. That being said, when things got, ugly, Alec was not very, very happy in the huddle, and he said that there might have been a little bit of a lack of communication in the huddles.
It's unacceptable and it's infuriating, and I don't name guys. I know that I have to be a lot better, and we just have to do a lot of things better going into Rutgers that we're not gonna separate, because it really just felt like a lot of guys were. They were kind of unapproachable, and that's my fault. As I'm a 5th year on this team. I got to be somebody that's able to kind of bridge those gaps with some of our other guys and kind of keep everybody's head level and not just get too caught up. And when you get your ass kicked like that, it's just yeah.
Now, you can tell, Mike, based on that quote, that this one obviously hurt Alec really deep, and we'll have more quotes to share as we continue on the conversation. But I don't want to make mountains out of molehills, but that quote I thought was very telling. Is there maybe some sort of confidence issue with this team, or do they have a short fuse if things go wrong?
It's hard to say. Obviously, looking at the energy that they brought last night, it'd be easy to say, when things aren't going well, it's hard on them, but I do want to give them a shout out. They're down 15 pretty early or something like that. They were down big pretty quick there. And in the first half, I think they showed a lot of fight, and they got it back to being, they're within striking distance there at halftime. And I felt pretty comfortable at half. I thought maybe they'd come out, look hot, and go on a little run and kind of do their thing. They've been a pretty good second half team the whole year, but that just didn't happen. And maybe what Alex said has a little bit to do with that. So I don't know, maybe it's been, like I said, a couple episodes now, 3 days rest between games for a while now. Maybe it's just starting to wear on them. They get a couple extra days here between Rutgers just maybe to recharge their battery. It's been kind of a grind, and I get that, but at the same time, you got to bring that energy. You got to be, responsible for your own attitude, highs and lows. If you're being unapproachable in a huddle or something like that in a team sport like basketball, that's going to affect everybody. So tough to hear. Obviously Alec took kind of the higher road, and he put that on himself, saying, he's a 5th-year guy, that he's got to do better there. But honestly, everybody's responsible for their own individual effort, attitude, and hope to see that improved on our next road game at Rutgers.
Alec was very unhappy with some of the conversations and huddles and games within the game that happened, and Fred was not very happy about the game, nor was anybody else in the postgame.
Yeah, it was the perimeter, it was the inside, it was the middle. I mean, it was everything. We were very soft tonight. And, Iowa puts you in a tough position with their movement, and you got to be able to talk when you're playing against a motion offense. We weren't talking out there, we weren't communicating, we weren't getting matched up. It was obviously a bad night all the way around. And when you dig yourself a 17-2 hole, it takes a lot to climb out. To our guys' credit, they did that. And you come back all the way and take a lead, and then you let them get comfortable again. And they threw a zone out there, which, we missed some bunnies, we missed some open ones. But, again, just soft out of the gate. Can't have it. So what we always worry about after a big emotional win is a hangover like that. That's tough to do against Iowa with the way they move, the way they score it, and, give them credit.
And Fred mentioned, the words soft, the words not prepared, the words, lacking energy, those types of things. Mike, my problem with what happened last night was that the defense was frankly unacceptable. I mean, that you had some nice little stretches there, as you mentioned, in the late first half, but a lot of defense comes down to effort. And you could almost see on the faces and the movement within the team itself that when the shots weren't falling, it translated right over to the defensive end with lack of effort.
They didn't bring it on the defensive end. I know, there were a couple times it seemed where it'd just be an off-the-ball screen, and it's basic stuff, switching guys as they've been doing all season. And, there's a couple times where 2 guys go to 1 guy. It's a simple skip pass into wide open 3, and the guys just kind of look around like, well, shit, whose job was that? So I think that goes back to, what Coach said there with lack of communication, kind of also what Alex said, lack of communication. We talked about it in the pregame. It's obviously a big letdown spot after a big emotional win over a number 1 team. And I think that's kind of one thing that separates good teams from great teams. I don't think this Husker team, I'm not saying they're a bad team. Obviously, I think this Husker team is very good. They have the talent to beat anybody that we saw against Purdue. But what a great team will do is we've talked about consistency a lot this year, but a great team is always consistent. They're always going to bring that effort and that drive, that kind of killer instinct on the defensive end. And I just didn't see it from the Huskers this game. You can talk all you want about how good Iowa's shooting was. We said they're not a great 3-point shooting team. Well, they proved us wrong in this game. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of that has to do with the effort that the Huskers brought. It's a lot easier to hit those shots when you got a great look and there's nobody closing out and there's not a defender making it hard on you. And I think that's really the story of the game for me.
And Dirk had mentioned on Twitter, again, he joined us for the last episode, the Iowa preview. He mentioned on Twitter that, we can say that Iowa played a pretty good offensive game, but those wide open opportunities are solely there because of the Huskers' lack of defense. So while we can sit here and praise Iowa for having a good shooting night, we can equally kind of say that the Huskers played awful. I don't think there's any, work around that. And this has kind of been a trend defensively throughout the Huskers road games this year, Kansas State notwithstanding. And Alec kind of talked about that in another quote here in the post-game press conference.
I mean, so far, like, that's the story of our season. Like, we get great wins, and then we go out and just shit the bed. Like, the road itself has obviously not been great to us, but it's our own doing. Like, we're just we've been able, at Minnesota and now here, Wisconsin was its own thing where we just, like they were just kind of like piecing us apart. But like out here, it just felt like, in Minnesota, like we were just kind of giving them what they wanted.
Again, Mike, he talks about we're doing the same exact thing. This has happened multiple times now where we get a big win. Indiana, you get a nice win, and then you come back and you lay a huge goose egg, out at Wisconsin. Then you come back, have a great game against Purdue. We beat Purdue, come back and have a huge defensive letdown again on the road. So do you think there's something to be said about this team? We talk about lack of consistency, but why does it always seem to be on the defensive end?
Well, I think that's where the effort and the drive shows up the most is on the defensive end. Offense, I'm not going to say offense doesn't take effort, but it's a lot more nuanced, I feel like, on offense. It's a lot more team, whereas defense, you have to play as a team, absolutely, but it's a lot of, you're reacting to what the offense is wanting to do. So it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of effort is really mostly what comes out on the defensive end. You're not dictating what's going on. It's on you to stop the other person, which is kind of an attitude thing. It's an effort thing. So, yeah, I don't know. It's obviously been you can see a pretty blatant sequence going on here with these poor defensive performances now, and it's hopefully something that they can get righted. It seems like every other episode now I'm giving the defensive team credit and shouting out the coaches for their game plan, and then the game after that it's, well, the guys didn't bring the effort, and the other team shot the lights out of the building, and it was a big blowout loss. So hopefully somewhere between the highs and the lows we can figure something out and get to be a little more consistent and bring it every game.
And I think we'd be remiss, Mike, if we didn't mention Sam Hoiberg. Played obviously a very energetic game, maybe struggled at times on defense with, his built-in lack of height. Not a whole lot you can do on that side of things, but he took a lot of Lawrence's minutes when Lawrence went 0 for 2 from 3 right out of the gate here, I think in the first 2 minutes, threw up 2 shots. Now, I'm guessing that must not have been part of the game plan because Fred, in his press conference, had mentioned that you don't beat Iowa by shooting, trying to match their game. You don't beat Iowa 98-94 in their house. That's just not the recipe. But Sam Hoiberg, Mike, led the team with 6 rebounds. That cannot happen.
Frankly, it's surprising, looking at the box score today. You told me that, off air, and I was like, there's no way he actually did it, right? Yeah, no, he led the team, 6 rebounds. Mass and Gary both had 5, but when you're your 6th man coming off the bench as a guard is leading your team. Obviously, he played starter minutes. He played 25 minutes this game, but that's something you don't like to see. Obviously, Iowa did shoot a lot of threes, so, long shot, long rebound type of situation where that ball's going to kick out a little bit farther. But still, I think that just really goes to show the lack of hustle and effort on the defensive end, that Sam Hoiberg is going to be the guy pulling down most of your defensive rebounds. So obviously not what I'm sure was in the game plan, as you had mentioned with Jamarcus, shooting those threes. I feel like that happened a lot. And Fred mentioned it in the second half when they went to the zone. I feel like they were settling very early for very deep contested threes in the shot clock. And we talk about lack of effort on the defensive end. I think that's a little bit of lack of effort on the offensive end, just getting lazy and taking the first halfway somewhat decent look you can get instead of actually working the ball. They didn't work the ball. They didn't work the clock a lot. It was very fast, and I think we're playing up to Iowa's, like you said, kind of playing Iowa's game as a very up-tempo game, which is not where we wanted to be. That's where we ended up pretty much the whole game, and that's the reason they lost by nearly 20.
And you bring up a really interesting point there. Iowa, after Nebraska had taken a 1-point lead at one point there, and then I think they got a bucket or 2 of their own. I don't remember the exact sequence, but Iowa went to a 2-3 zone, and the Huskers had huge fits with it. Fred had a comment on that in the postgame press conference.
Well, we weren't, first of all, we weren't getting into our action. We weren't getting them. Once we got it in the middle, we were fine. And we were getting some high lows. We got some good looks that we missed. But when we first came down, we just were not getting to the right spots. And, once we settled down a little bit, but it was too late after that. Once they built that big lead, it was hard to climb back in it. And our shots obviously didn't fall tonight like they had been the last couple games. We scored, I think, 46 in the paint. So when we got it in there, good things happened. I think 30 of our 36 in the first half were in the paint. And the second half, again, we missed a couple right at the rim, and you got to make your open shots when you're playing against the zone. We didn't do that, but again, give Fran and give Iowa credit for that.
And Mike, Fred ended that quote by saying, give Fran a lot of credit. When he saw, and last thing I want to do is give an Iowa coach credit, but when he saw that we were shooting, abysmal from three, we ended the game shooting 15% on 4 of 26 from beyond the arc. Why would you not go to a zone? It makes a ton of sense. Just let us chuck it up if we're not even going to, catch iron on some of these.
Yeah, no, you got to give credit. It was a great adjustment by the Iowa coaching staff to go to that zone. And, it's really frustrating because I think, everybody knows, against 2-3, you work high post, short corner type of action. It's a lot easier said than done, obviously, when you're just talking about it theoretically or running on air than when there's actual bodies in the way. But as Fred mentioned, it just weren't getting into the sets, weren't getting into the action a lot. And I understand it can be tough. Iowa had been playing man-to-man the whole game, so to suddenly switch into your zone sets, it kind of throws off the rhythm, and I can get that. But it wasn't just for a little while. It was the entire time they're in the zone. We just did not look comfortable, and it's giving me shades of some of the Tim Miles teams that I remember. You'd come out with the zone, and we'd go on an 8-minute scoring drought, and it kind of flashbacks like that. So tough to see. Like you said, when we're not shooting the ball well, why not go to it? If we are shooting the ball well, obviously you shoot them out of a zone, but that wasn't happening last night, and that's the reason it was so successful for Iowa. Tough shooting night, and that's how they go sometimes, but I think a lot of that has to do with the shot selection that the Huskers were taking. Not very good looks pretty early in the possession, and just kind of settling for what they took.
So, Mike, this one was an ugly game. Again, Nebraska loses 94-76 in Iowa City. Huskers shoot 48% from the field on 30 of 63. 15% from three-point on 4 of 26. They go 80% from the line, 12 of 15, and they have 14 assists to 8 turnovers. So the Huskers, they actually took relatively good care of the ball, but Iowa goes 52% from the field on 35 of 67, 43% from 3 on 15 of 35, 64% from the stripe on 9 of 14, and Mike, the Hawkeyes had a whopping 30 assists to 6 turnovers. So
yeah. I do just want to say, you mentioned that the Huskers had 14 assists. Tony Perkins himself had 15 assists. So Tony Perkins out-assisted the Huskers by himself. Just despicable showing on the defensive end is what this boils down to, and hopefully they get it righted for the road test at Rutgers.
So a lot of ugly things to be said and to be shared about this one, but they need to wipe it. That being said, there was a lot of Twitter commentary on this one as well, so let's get into those.
So Husker fans, let's hear from you.
So, Husker fans, you had a lot of comments to share on our Twitter following this one. Obviously, it was a very emotional letdown loss after the big Purdue win, but let's get into these and discuss some of the ideas that you guys had. So, Evan Weekland says, I didn't want to believe it, but my gut told me a letdown was coming. On the road with 2 days rest after the biggest win of the year against a potent offense, it felt like we needed to split road games this week and beat Northwestern at home to stay on track. Flush it and on to the next. And Mike, I think the way I always looked at these next 2 games was that you need to go 1-1. And I think Rutgers, as we'll get into it, is the easier one of the two. But this one still hurts just as much. And, our net rating I think we fell 12 spots, I tweeted today. So this one hurts the metrics. We can't lie about it.
Oh, absolutely. Getting blown out the way we did is always going to hurt, especially in the net. It feels like margin of victory has a big portion to do with that. Yeah, no, it's tough. I think this is an opportunity for another quad 1 win. It would have been nice to go back-to-back with them. So you want to talk about a loss that doesn't necessarily hurt you too much when it comes to resume. A quad 1 loss, nobody's going to really, pin that on you. Would have been a good opportunity to pad the resume, but the game against Northwestern, I think, is a far more important one as far as not losing it. If we would have went 2-0 on the road and beat Iowa and Rutgers, I would have been ecstatic. A win against Iowa would have been huge, but I think, like you said, on to the next one. We really got to focus up. Can't drop this one against Rutgers.
Justin Huber says, embarrassing performance. There's lots to work on, and Fred needs to be asked all the questions. Blake Kaler says, we let essentially every competent player from Iowa beat us for 40 minutes straight. We got to find a way sometimes if they want to be a team that is respected. And Jacob Wright says, we got to start competing on the road. Blowout losses are not going to cut it come Selection Sunday. Eli Rice provided a nice spark, but we need other guys to contribute. Living and dying by the 3 is a bailout. Disappointing showing, especially with the small crowd, too. And that's, I think, the biggest thing I took away from both this and the Minnesota loss, Mike, is, we can talk about playing on the road and tough environments and all those types of things, but honestly, at the end of the day, it was an empty arena. I mean, there was nobody there. So it's hard to justify losing the way we did.
Yeah, I mean the home court advantage obviously wasn't as big. I don't think it negates the fact that it was 2 days rest with a day of travel in there too. So it's always hard to go on the road, especially in the Big Ten, as I had mentioned in the pregame. But yeah, no, like you said, nobody was there. We have to be better on the road. We've yet to win a conference game on the road. It's great that we've defended home court the way we have, but like I think it was Jacob Wright said in the replies there, if it comes Selection Sunday and we have an abysmal road record in conference, it's not going to get it done. So got to find a way to start winning some of these road conference games. I know it's not easy, but just got to find a way, got to dig deep and pull a couple out here.
Maddox Show says, I can stomach losses, but it's hard to stomach being non-competitive. How do we not even compete against Creighton, Wisconsin, and Iowa? Nebraska Cubby says, has Fred never seen a zone defense before? I can draw up a better scheme than throwing up deep threes. And Husker Prod says, no effort at all, which sucked the most. I felt this is a possible trap game to begin with, and I was right. And Mike, the biggest thing I guess that I take away going into Rutgers is, are we to be able to show up on the road against a team that we probably are better than?
And that remains to be seen. I'd love to say yes and answer that definitively, but as we've seen, they just haven't shown up on the road. 2 massive blowout losses now in Wisconsin and Iowa, and I've yet to see anything that instills belief that we're going to get it done on the road. And then if you want to talk about the other loss on the road, obviously the Minnesota game, that was before Christmas break. It feels like it's been a while, but the second half meltdown in that game without their best player, Darson Garcia, that was an inexcusable loss too. So 3 really tough losses on the road. They got to figure something out before they head to the rack and take on Rutgers.
Whizbang Hoops says, extremely predictable letdown game. Fan base shouldn't, but will overreact to this one. We love Nebraska ball. Sam Hoiberg Fan Club says, sadly, you will never win a game shooting 16% from 3, but forget about it and move on. Husker Power says, I hate Iowa. They ruin everything. Hard to disagree there. And Patrick Schmidt says, pathetic, expected, and yet disappointed. Onward to Rutgers. And honestly, Mike, I think Patrick summed it up exactly right. We all knew this is a letdown spot. I don't think anybody expected us to go out and shoot, 62% from 3 again like we did against Purdue, but that doesn't make it hurt any less.
No, and I think a lot of those comments got it right where it's, on to the next one. It is what it is. Got to put it behind us at this point, kind of like what Fred had preached about the Purdue game, put it behind you. But at this point, really, you do have to do that. I think, a couple extra days rest hopefully will help to kind of hit the reset button, put it behind it. As I've been saying a lot, it's one game at a time. It's on to Rutgers now. We can't change this result. So just got to go out and get a W in the next one, and we'll see what they do when they travel to Piscataway.
So I want to thank everybody again for sharing their comments. If you'd like to be included on the show, make sure you reply to our Huskers What Are Your Thoughts tweet after each and every game. We post them right about at the last buzzer, so we try to catch all the live and passionate thoughts that we can as they come to everybody.
You are listening to the Scarlet Shootaround podcast.
Okay, Mike, so let's get into the Rutgers preview. But before we do, I believe you have a sponsor to share.
Yes, sir. This segment, the Rutgers Preview, is brought to you by Tax and Business Consultants, providing all the tax, accounting, payroll, and consulting that your business needs. They partner with you to specifically tailor strategies suited to you and your business. Committed to positive client outcomes since 1961, they've been relieving stress related to taxes in all forms. Their offices are located in Blair, Columbus, and Lyons, so give them a call at 402-426-4144 or visit their website at www.tbc.tax. That is T as in Tominaga, B as in Bryce Williams, and C as in Coach Hoiberg.tax. Once again, that phone number is 402-426-4144. Go Big Red.
All right, Mike, so let's get into Rutgers. This team, not off to a great start this year. They've had a couple bad losses. Preseason ranked 10th in the Big Ten. Notable wins for them. Number 67, Seton Hall on the road, probably their best shining win on the resume, 70-63. Number 87, Indiana at home, 66-57. And they barely beat number 351, Ken Palm Stonehill, 59-58 at home, and I believe needed a miracle three-pointer at the end of the game to even take the lead in that one. So Rutgers known to maybe play down to their opponents a little bit. Notable losses for this team, They lost to number 45 Iowa on the road, as we just did, although a much smaller margin, losing 86-77. Lost to number 10 Illinois at home, 76-58, and lost to number 38 Ohio State in a close one on the road, 76-72. So one of the better games that they've played this year. KenPom-wise, they are 85th overall. Offense checking in at an abysmal 251st nationally. Defense, though, they are 7th in the country, which is kind of their calling card, via Steve Peichel. And tempo, they play at the 159th pace, much faster on offense than defense. They'll drag you out on the defensive end. So, Mike, what about Rutgers sticks out to you in the scouting report?
Yeah, as you had mentioned, going through their KenPom stats, it's definitely defense. Top 10 in adjusted efficiency, so total defense. But even beyond that, they're number 1 in the nation in non-steal turnover percent, so they force a lot of throwaways. And they're 5th in block percent in the country. They're top 20 in 2-point defense. So really, the defensive side of the ball is really good. They're also top 20 in turnover percent, period. So turning people over nearly 23% of the time. So the big thing is Huskers are going to have to take care of the ball. They did a pretty good job against Iowa. They've done a pretty good job the last few games. Early in the season, the turnover bug was kind of an issue, but hopefully they can keep up with that and then take care of the ball against Rutgers. And I think that would severely limit what Rutgers could do to damage them on the offensive end if you take care of the ball and don't give them any easy, transition opportunities.
So some of the pieces that Rutgers is going to trot out against us, Mike, their point guard Derek Simpson, a 6'3 sophomore, averaging 9, 3, and 3, shooting 33% from the field, 30% from 3. He did score 23 points twice this year, but not a great passer. His season high is 5 assists, so a little bit of work to do on the passing for him for a point guard. Other big piece they have their power forward, Andre Hyatt, a 6'6 senior, averaging 12, 6, and 1, shooting 39% from the field, 35% from 3, and he's their main three-point option. A lot of his game is based beyond the perimeter. He's their leading scorer and had a stat line of 9, 10, and 2 on the road against Ohio State, so nearly a double-double for him there. And their big piece at the 5 spot, Cliff Amori, I don't know if I said that right, probably not, but 6'11 senior, averaging 10, 9, and 1, shooting 50% from the field, has not hit any of his 4 3-point attempts on the year. He's a powerful rebounder and had 25 and 11 against LIU and had 8 offensive rebounds against Bryant. So, Mike, they don't have a lot of threats from beyond the arc or really from the field in general, but they do have a couple nice pieces that they'll show us.
Yeah, they will. And then this is, big-time college basketball, so they're always going to be guys that you got to look out for. You can't sleep on anybody. It's going to be a lot of inside work, I'd assume. It seems like they score a majority of their points, center wise or from their 3 positions. So their forwards, their front court's going to do a lot of the work. Don't have to worry too much about their back court in general. They're not the best rebounding team. They do check in at 270th on defensive rebounding. So Huskers may get a chance to get some easy putbacks there. But yeah, can't sleep on anybody, especially on the road. As we've mentioned, the Huskers come out looking flat. So if they have a good defensive game plan, lockdown. You mentioned they're not a great 3-point shooting team necessarily. So maybe they'll be more willing to give up looks there. We've seen the Huskers double in the paint a lot so far this season. It seems to be kind of what the coaching staff wants to do on the defensive end, and that may work out in the Huskers' favor this game.
They do have another decent forward, Mawat Mag, a 6'7 senior, shooting 11, 5, and 2, 36% from the field, a sub 30% 3-point shooter. He did tear his ACL last year, but he came back, I believe, against Seton Hall, so he's only played 7 or 8 games this year thus far. But he did have a stat line of 24, 10, and 1 against Iowa, so a guy that we may need to watch out for. At shooting guard, they have Noah Fernandez, a 5'11 senior, averaging 8, 2, and 2, 34% from the field guy, 27% from 3. He's a grad transfer from UMass, and he was a threat when he was there as he shot 46% from beyond the arc over there the prior year, so need to make sure that we keep an eye on him as well. Then off the bench, they'll bring out a couple guys, but the biggest threat that I saw is Jamichael Davis, a 6'2 freshman, averaging 5, 3, and 3, shooting 34% from the field, 28% from 3. He's a pretty good defender off the bench, and he's seen a scoring uptick the last 6 games. But, Mike, as you kind of alluded to and mentioned, this team is not based on offense. They're based on defense. So, a lot of the stats on the defensive side are fantastic. You mentioned they're a fantastic team blocking. I lost my spot on my notes. Anyways, Mike, they have a great blocking defense. They've got some really nice pieces on the defensive side, and Steve Peichel's always going to trot out a team that that makes a defense-first mentality come to life.
Yeah, that's obviously their calling card. We've said it a lot so far. Not too scary on the offensive end. So maybe that'll help what the Huskers have been lacking so far in their conference road games. Seems like defense has always been the big worry. So going against a team that's, ranking towards the bottom in conference, they're in fact bottom of the conference in their offensive efficiency as per Ken Palm. So that should maybe a little bit of a chance for a get right game, a chance to come out and, take care of business. I think another thing to look forward to, I've been talking about Huskers not having a ton of rest. They are away at Michigan State on the 14th, and then they're home against the Huskers on the 17th. So they'll be coming off, just a couple days rest, trying to come against they got a tough game against Michigan State. We know that Spartan team is pretty good. They've looked much improved since the Huskers have played them. So maybe a tough spot for Rutgers, in only a 2-day rest, whereas the Huskers get a handful. So just, a couple things maybe looking up for the Huskers, get like I said, a chance for a good bounce back game and get their first conference road win, hopefully.
Yes, and offensively, Mike, like we kind of talked about, they're 343rd nationally in offensive effective field goal percentage. They're 336th nationally in three-point percentage. They're 334th nationally in two-point percentage. And they're 305th nationally in free throw percentage. So this is a team that just straight up, flat out cannot shoot the ball, whether there's a defender there or not. So this is an opportunity for Nebraska. As you mentioned, Rutgers is going to be off a short rest week in a physical game that they're going to play at Michigan State. And Michigan State, as it sits right now, I believe, are at 1-4 in the conference. So Michigan State they're going to bring their all to this one. They're starting to, maybe get a little bit of question on heading toward the bubble more and more every day. So this is going to be a big game for Michigan State. And finally, I think the Huskers are going to have more rest than their opponent for a game. So I don't think we've had that more or less all year. So that'll be a nice change of pace as well. But Mike, a lot of this is going to come down to effort on the offensive end as well. Obviously defense as well. But Mike, a lot of this one's going to come down to how well Nebraska can shoot against an elite Rutgers defense. Just looking at the numbers specifically, they're 11th nationally in effective field goal percentage. They're 14th nationally in defensive turnovers. They cause a lot of problems. You mentioned earlier, they're first in the country in non-steal turnovers, so they'll force you to make a lot of mistakes. They work really fast on offense. They play at the 33rd quickest offensive tempo nationally, but they lock in on defense. And I believe they're top 10 in defensive length of possession. So this is going to be a tough one for the Huskers and really going to test their might and mettle.
Yeah, it is. I will say one thing, looking at point distribution on Rutgers defensive end, they are a little slightly above average prone to giving up 3-pointers. I think the country, the D1 average is about 30% of points coming from three. They gave up about 32, 33. So a slight edge there as far as that scores. They are pretty good at defending the two though. So once again, kind of the same situation that we've talked about multiple times this year. If the Huskers can shoot the three and knock down the three ball, obviously it helps a ton no matter what team you are, but especially when you're the Huskers and the number one, team in the Big Ten at 3-point attempts per game. It's really going to come down to whether the Huskers can hit those shots, like you said, against a great defensive team like Rutgers. And it remains to be seen if they can come out and bring that energy on the road.
Ken Palm, Mike, has this one as a 70-69 Nebraska win, and Torvik has it as a 69-68 Nebraska win. So let's project this one at Nebraska -1. Where are you feeling?
Yeah, after the gut check that was Iowa, I'm back on the Husker hype train. It's kind of hard to be on the hype train after an 18-point loss on the road, but I think everybody saw that as a big letdown spot. I think this is, like I said, a good chance for a get-right game on the road, get a great chance to get the first conference road win at the vaunted rack. So I see the Huskers winning this one by maybe about 5. Give me like a 75-70 final.
I'm going to take Nebraska -1 as well, Mike. I think offensively, this Rutgers team reminds me a lot of Indiana. They have a couple good bigs, but they have basically nothing for shooters. As a matter of fact, as you mentioned, they're the worst offensive team in the conference. So a little bit of a similar Indiana build. So I think our doubling the post strategy is going to come back into play as we did against Purdue and Indiana prior. So I'm sure we'll see a lot of doubling down low. Nebraska, again, as we talked about, is going to be on 4 days of rest, and Rutgers only on 2 as they travel back home. So I think Nebraska should have fresh legs for this one, fingers crossed. And Nebraska has rebounded well this year, but they're bad on the road. So something among those two is going to have to change. And here's to hoping that Nebraska can fix their road woes and get a nice, big Big Ten road win heading out to Piscataway. So my final score prediction for this one, Mike, 72-63. I think Nebraska actually runs away for a mini blowout in this one on the road and gets their road problems corrected. So that being said, let's move on to the end of the show and get you guys out of here.
You are listening to the Scarlet Shootaround podcast.
All right, Mike, so Huskers heading up to Piscataway for a big one. You hate to say that it's a must-win, but you hate to go 0-2 on the road in this mini stretch.
Yeah, no, that would be, obviously worst case scenario, not winning either of them. But no, that'd be kind of a nightmare scenario, especially after the big kind of statement win against Purdue to come and let down 2 clunkers and get 2 losses. That kind of bring everybody back down to earth and once again kind of put the Huskers more looking at the bubble, maybe in the first 4 out region, because they've been pretty comfortably in since that Purdue game. So we'll see. I think this is a chance for, I think it's a quad 2 win on the road here. Rutgers isn't very high in the net, so not a quad 1 opportunity, but hate to lose a quad 2 game. That looks a lot worse on the resume than a quad 1 loss. So take care of business. Get a good showing. Maybe prove to themselves a little bit as a team that they get it done on the road, because basketball, just like any other sport, basketball is kind of a mental game, and I would be shocked if the guys don't realize that they haven't won a road conference game, and maybe that starts to wear on them a bit. So hopefully get that off that monkey off their back and prove that they can do it for themselves, for the fans, and move on with the rest of the schedule. But as always, one game at a time. Focus on what Rutgers is going to bring. As you'd mentioned, a lot of they got a couple pretty talented bigs, so we've seen that defensive game plan work for us before. Hopefully we can get it implemented and executed well.
Make sure you follow us on Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at Scarlet Shoot Pod. Our Twitter, we're active all the time, sharing updates on bracketology changes, roster changes, any Big Ten news, and anything that we feel is important to share. YouTube, we post our video podcast, and that's kind of actually growing in interest over time. I think we're getting probably 20 to 25 views on our YouTube uploads all the time now. So make sure if you prefer video podcasts, you subscribe there. Instagram, we post very sporadically. If there's something related to Nebraska basketball that we were involved in, we'll share it on there, but that's more of a fun thing. And make sure you follow the show on Apple and Spotify so you never miss an episode. Would really appreciate it if you guys would go down to whichever platform you're on and rate us 5 stars. Helps us pop up in search results, and we'll make sure to share any 5-star rating that we get on our Twitter as well. So I do want to announce that we'll have a special guest for our Alumni Weekend Northwestern preview in the next episode, so look forward to that. But beyond that, Mike, let's make sure that we get this win. For the Scarlet Shootaround podcast, my name is Blake, and for Mike, go Big Red.
Go Big Red, baby.